afternoon, everybody. We are here online to take a session of this WhatIf conference. Together, I'm Filipe Marques. I'll be the host of this session. With me are David Lopes from Faculty of Fine Arts of University of Porto, and Cynthia Montaudon Tomas. Please correct me. From Puebla, Mexico, the Universidad de Puebla in Mexico. And so we'll have two sessions, two talks. David will start about 20 to 25 minutes. Then Cynthia will take the stage, and in the end we'll have a discussion that I invite you to make some questions to each other and, of course, the audience. So a brief introduction to David.
I think I can share the screen, right?
You can share the screen, David, if you want. I was just going to make a...
Okay, so...
As you wish.
So can I start? I will just...
Okay,
go on. Fit this here. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is David. I'm currently a teacher at the Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Porto. And I'm also taking my PhD there with focus on printmaking. Part of what I'm going to talk here today, it's about, it's focus on that research. And well, it's adapted for the conference, of course. And I will be discussing printmaking in a very technical sense. And we'll be exploring historical alternatives around the theme of printmaking and cartography. My presentation is called Artistically Expressing the Oppressed, Framing Contemporary Printmaking for its Technological Past. And my co-author is not here today, is Professor Graciela Machado, which is also my supervisor. So I'll just start with a quote by Walter Benjamin. Walter Benjamin had written extensively about history and printmaking as well. He wrote a very famous text that is a reference to the theory of fine arts, and is focused on the impact of reproduction in society, and it's very connected to Marxist ideas. It's mostly focused on the impact of technology on the living person. For him, it's very clear that technology and power are bound together, and the two of them are produce an impact on people's lives. For him, it's not astonishing that any historical upheaval which brings into power other classes than the ruling ones regularly goes hand to hand with changes in the techniques of pictorial reproduction. And with this, I also want to go to another quote, which is very known. I won't be reading German because I can't, but I'm sure you all know this phrase because it's written on the Auschwitz. It's written in the Auschwitz concentration camps. It's written on other concentration camps, and it says, "Work will set you free." So printmaking before our age of digital reproduction was done in places such as this. The photo itself, it's not very illustrative, but the rest of the talk will show machines like this that you can see on the right. That this is a lithograph press, and this is an older model. A different model will be here, but before, images were printed in places such as this and with machines such as this. Printing has gone into a very digital, has gone into a very evolutionary path during the 19th century. Mostly every industry and other fields of science developed a lot in the 19th century. This was a century of a lot of technical advances, and printing sort of helped pave that way. A lithograph press usually will function something like what you see in the illustration. It goes forward and on the other direction, and it's pressing down on top of a stone. What you see here is a stone lithography, and what you see on top of the stone lithography is an image produced in Greece. What I'm describing to you is a matrix. In technical terms, you have to ignore the stone, but if you focus on the image, and if you see the image that is reverse, meaning that the paper will go on top of it, and under the press will produce a print. That's the reverse part of this image. So every image that you see in the 19th century was probably produced with a stone lithography, but not only. Before stone lithography was invented, people were printing from copper plates. What you see here is a copper plate, and the image that you see is the map of Lisbon. On this little zoom here, you'll see how the lines were produced, how thin they were. But in general, you could talk about print and printmaking in copper plates, and traditionally that's the most predominant history of prints. What you see here as well is a graph made by an American researcher that has already passed, but here you'll see how the 19th century you can see a change. Before the 19th century, there were only two methods of printing: relief and intaglio. Intaglio is what you see here on the left. Relief is a more common way of printing. I won't be explaining here, but in general, you can see how intaglio sort of took over for many centuries, for around 2 centuries actually, what was mostly the printing parts. And eventually intaglio decreased from the 19th century because stone lithography, which is called the planar printing, took over. And with it, relief also took over a little bit. Relief printing is what you can say, something that's printed from the lines that are on the upper side of the matrix. But the talk won't delve into the technical parts of relief printing, so I'm gonna ask you to bear with me and focus on stone lithography. So stone lithography. We research in the Fine Arts Academy, in the Fine Arts faculty. We research prints, and we make our research with a technical basis. And we sort of had to claim, or we had to create a methodology, and we had to name it and we had to coin it. Researching in fine arts, especially when you are researching in a very complex field where you're researching either culture or cultural aspects, you have to decide on, in every research, you have to decide an angle, right? So here we are choosing the technical angle. And because of that, we also need to be aware of our place in the field of researching in fine arts. This is kind of a niche, I have to say. In the university, there isn't a lot of research focused on technological aspects of art. So we had to sort of coin a name for it. And this was proposed by Professor Graciela Machado. It's called technological archaeology. And it's called archaeology because it proposes, it sets itself in a way that it's making the research going backwards. So we're looking at past century techniques. And the reason we're doing that, it's because right now we have printmaking in a university contest, but we don't know a lot about the history of the techniques because they sort of became obsolete, and with that, the knowledge wasn't passed down. So that's the reason why we are researching these techniques, because we no longer know how to do them. And we do this by different steps. First, we analyze historical objects. What you see on the right is what was my first visit to the archive of the University of Porto. when I was doing the PhD, I had only decided that I was going to work with the archive. And I knew that I was going to work with prints because I'm a printmaker. But then I had to focus as well. So I chose maps. And what you're seeing is sort of like an overview of what kind of maps exist there. And well, some maps were printed in outside of Portugal. Some maps were printed inside of Portugal. We then decided that we would focus on the maps that were produced in Portugal, because even though there is a lot of information regarding them, there isn't a lot of information regarding how to produce them in Portugal. And that's how we thought we could set ourselves apart from other researchers. Then we go into technical manuals. So this means going to historical books and see how things were done before. We try to catch as much as information as possible. Here you have to think that when you are reading a technical treatise, for example, from the 19th century, we are hearing a person speaking, describing a workshop that might be different from ours. Even though most of the machinery still remains the same, I'm sure someone that works in conservation knows what I'm talking about, but the way people describe things back then might change slightly. Even the name of the material itself might be different and might be misleading. So we try to get as much as information as we can, little hints. We read the correspondence between printmakers and who are they buying from. We see the illustrations, and then we go hands-on work. And sometimes we have to even produce our own materials, and we have to go really from scratch, from reproducing more or less simple recipes, but nonetheless time-consuming. And then we go on to work. So this is, for example, me. I'm reproducing a map, and I'm copying a map from one of the existing exemplars that is in the University of Porto. Here you can see a little detail of it, and this is me working at the printmaking workshop. Some of these stones, actually, all of these stones are from historical Portuguese archives, and we are really trying to get as much as information as we can regarding the technical scene of producing maps in Portugal in the 19th century as much as we can. So technological archaeology proposes a reenactment in a sense, but we're not reenacting because we want to bring we don't want to bring the technical aspects of it to our time. We want to reenact because we want to know how it felt. So we are reenacting to come closer to the people that were producing these maps, and it's, in a way, it creates an embodiment experience, meaning that we are much more able now, because we went through the process of reproducing cartography as it was in the 19th century. We are much closer now to understanding how the people's daily life were, and how much it took to draw a map, and what were the constraints, and what were the possible technical problems they faced. The maps that we are analyzing we are now narrowed to two. This is one of them. It was made in Portugal. It's in Leiria. It's the famous it's a forest, and it's a pine forest, and it's a very famous one. And we have a map from Angola, Luanda. On one hand, we have a continental map, and we have on the other we have a colonial map. So making a map really was about different steps. We have to think that printmakers weren't the only actors in this scene, right? So we have the cartographers, the people that were drawing the maps, and here we kind of have a collage of all of it. People preparing the maps, the people that were the colonels, the military that were behind the coordination of the maps, and then we have the people going to the actually hands-on work on the scene, on the field, taking the measurements, and then if you bear with me, you will see here the stone lithographies and how they were making the prints, making the matrices, then to print the maps. Here you can see a person analyzing a map. And within a map, you have these different aspects, right? So you have, for example, here on green, you have the roads, here you have the letters, and here you have the geographical information. And all of this could be made by different people. And in general, what would happen is that you are really drawing very tiny information. So this is made by scale, because analyzing the maps, we photograph the maps, so we know how much tiny this information was. And you can see here me working on a glass while drawing. Here you can have like a sense of how small these maps are, or not small in size, but the information wise. Within here is a centimeter, and you can see how tiny the information is. Within the fine art contents, we also had to learn how to draw, for example, mountains or roads in a scientific way, or at least as scientific as the 19th century was. And here you can see me understanding how the maps of mountains of the maps were created, or they were as they were thought in topographical lines. Because we're doing research on these very old techniques, we also have old manuals to draw topography. So we have access to older illustrations, and they also explain how to draw the mountains. And we have other information as well, so we can have the different textures they were using in maps, the different fonts, and the different lowercase. And then we apply this on work, right? I hope it has visibility, but here you can see one of the stones that is prepared for an exhibition that we're going to have in the University of Porto within a year. We're going to have an exhibition around these maps and how we can reproduce them. So we're going to have the stone lithographies and a printed material and videos such as this showing how the information was done. So regarding history and how we can think of maps in this historical sense, we also have to understand that maps have a really strong connection to power. Only powerful elites were going to produce maps. Maps were very expensive to make. They required a lot of resources, a lot of people working on them, and a lot of time. So maps were only made by powerful people, and powerful people had powerful means, and they had powerful agendas. Maps were connected to states, to military, to people behind specific agendas. There a lot of authors connect maps to their to imperialistic agendas, and Portugal, like much European countries, produce maps of Africa as well to assert political occupation later, and to assert knowledge over the territory. It was a way to compete over colonial territorial Africa and also Brazil. My question would be, can we be so appreciative of these very beautiful maps without understanding this impact of these political agendas and Portugal's actions over these countries? Shouldn't we try to represent history in its all complexity, and acknowledge this practice for what they truly are, forms of propaganda and imperial assertions over other cultures? And this is where I come forward with what I think it's relevant to discuss alternative history. Walter Benjamin didn't coin the term historical materialism. He did coin the term called dialectical images, which is an abstract philosophical concept, which I won't be focusing here, but I'll be focusing on this figure of the rag picker. So Walter Benjamin lived through he actually lived through the two great wars of here in Europe, and he committed suicide in the Second War because he was Jewish and he was fleeing, and he thought he was going to be caught, so he committed suicide in Spain. But he wrote a lot about history and how he thought history had a way to present itself as a progress, because technology as a progress, and how history was associated with technological progress, and how that was portrayed in his time as something positive. And he didn't saw that as something positive. He actually saw the people in his life being overworked. He saw people changing their lives from rural to the factories, and he was very aware of the class struggle. So Walter Benjamin was a Marxist. Clearly, he states this very obviously in his texts. And for him, the rag picker is a profession that it was very common in the 19th century. It was this person that would collect the rags and the what people didn't want in the cities during the night, and he would try to sell these things he found during the morning. So the rag picker was something that represented human misery and human poverty in the 19th century.
5 minutes, please.
Thank you. You have a picture here of the rag picker, and to him and to other philosophers, the rag picker is an atlas. Did Huberman talks about this extensively. A rag picker is someone that is obligated to carry the weight of poverty. And we also have representations of the rag picker in Portugal. This is one of them. And what I made an association between the rag picker was our figure of the Zé Povinho, which is a Bordalo Pinheiro caricature. And with it, I have made a few projects regarding him, thinking of the printmaking as also a rag picker, or what it would be the translation in German, the Lupenslammler. So I made these illustrations as an art project because I'm an artist and I'm also working within a fine art contest, which reflect the use of what I need to use to do maps within the caricatures and with the faces of Zé Povinho. Here you can see some of the details of it. And with it, you can also see me working on the stone lithographies and also Zé Povinho. So my question of what if would be to think of this figure as something more. What if printmakers could change the path maps were produced? What if printmakers could express themselves through maps and convey their opinions and their historical visions of what they thought was a better society? And thinking about, for example, colonial maps, what if they understood their impact on future lives? What if they understood how we would perceive colonial maps forward in time? Would they change the course of different geographical sites? Would they mislead military occupations? Would they try to make it better for other people that were living in Africa, for example? And I thought about that way before I saw the conference. But the conclusion that I always got was that maps were never neutral and they were never truthful. You can see here what's called the Serra de Canganza, and this was a very important site for the colonial wars that most of our grandfathers and our parents lived through. And you can see how it's represented in this map of Luanda, and you can see the real shape of it in Google Maps here. For example, if you see this small area here, Calandula, you can see where is actually is farther away from these mountain sites. So maps were never really truthful. So in general, changing the maps and making a voice for the printmakers wouldn't probably change nothing in the course of life. You can see here how the map itself doesn't really match geographical sites. We do get right the by the sea information, but forward in the continent we don't get it right. But still, what if we change that? And we had a voice over time, and we could have changed the course of colonial wars and Africa occupation. I'm finishing, but I want to show you something more. So my dad was in the colonial wars, and this is some photos of his war album. I wonder what if my dad had never gone to war because something had happened before. My father lived in Campanha, in Porto, and he was sent to Moeda, Mozambique, where he fought. I recently found him in the archives of the RTP as a 20-year-old man. Right now, I'm older than him, and I could only see him for a few seconds. But this is there is a lot of videos around this team of the Mensagens de Natal. It's mean Christmas messages, and all of the soldiers were line up in a row to send Christmas messages to their families. It's only a few seconds that I see my father, but it took me over 3 hours to find him, and it was a great feeling to hear his voice as a 20-year-old man. But still, I wonder, what if my dad had never gone to war? And all of these implications with maps, if somehow they could have changed the history of the path of history that would lead our people to fight in a colonial war where we didn't have to go to. And with that, I finish my talk. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David, for keeping the time and for the relevant and very interesting topic. We'll discuss it for sure in some moments. Now I'll give the word to Cynthia so we can move on to the next team. Cynthia, please introduce yourself and the team. Thank you. I think you are in mute.
Okay, so can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we do.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to be talking about business consulting. That's what I do. I'm currently the Dean of a business school here in Puebla. And consulting is one of the mandatory courses in all the business school. So we have been teaching students on how to do consulting in different ways. And since 2021, we have been part of the WhatIf' conference. And we have introduced different ways of doing consulting using this as a technique. So we have used it, for example, in scenario planning, in process reengineering, benchmarking, in general, how to promote organizational change, to promote diversity in organizations, asking what if all the high-level jobs were occupied by women instead of men, and things like that. So today I'm going to just show you another technique that we're using to kind of get the feel of what it would be to change the past of a company to change a future. Of course, we're talking about fantasy, this idea of alternate history. But the good thing about this is we try to identify critical issues and valuable tools. And this is relevant because unless we change the way in which we look at consulting normally, we cannot change the outcomes. And there's an African proverb that says, if you want a different dance, change the music. So that's what we're trying to do, to introduce novel ways to look at consulting in organizations. So the target is to use alternate history in different ways. And we've seen an increased interest in all fields, especially in business. People are looking at this to try to identify possible paths, or specifically in scenario planning. And we know that this has been very useful. We have been doing this for almost 3 years now, and we have worked with businesses and they have become really interested because it allows us to look at the past in a completely different way. And in essence, we become time travelers. And maybe we're talking about a company with certain employees that were not there in the past, but they have to kind of go back and imagine what it would have been like if they were there. And what would they have found about the remnants of the business or specific situations. And the good thing is that they can imaginarily go back in time as many times as possible, or as many times as they want, and reimagine different paths that they could have chosen, and identify critical moments in time that they could have changed if they could. The problem with change in organization is that when you change something, this creates pain. People don't like to change. There's resistance as a natural process, because it kind of relates to people's vulnerability. I'm used to doing a certain way. I feel comfortable in this way, so you take me off my comfort zone. So we need to move from diagnosis, which is the regular way of doing consulting, to discovery. And diagnosis is basically, we can think of the consultant as an organizational doctor that comes into the organization and takes the temperature to see how the climate is and look at the symptoms, and that's it. But now if we go back in history, we can actually start discovering different things that might be obscure or not as easily identifiable as if just one person comes and look for a basic diagnosis. In this way, what we're trying to do is changing the conversation about what are the problems that are emerging in businesses so that we can change the culture. And changing the culture is not an easy task, because culture entails a lot of different things, habits, values, ways of thinking that are really ingrained in how people act. And something that's really important about change is that people want confirmation about what they do or certain things, not change necessarily. So what we're trying to do is make confirmation through change. And in this way, what we're doing is building trust. And if people feel safe and secure, there's less resistance to change. And in consulting practices, storytelling is really important. And this relates to the idea of connection-based learning, because they connect to others through stories. In fact, everybody has a story to tell. And that's what makes us human, and that's what connects us. And what we try to do with this consulting practice is trying to change a company's past to correct wrongdoings or even prevent future failures. But this sounds like science fiction. But we can do it in a way in which we can bring those problems to the present and analyze them under a different light. And something that's really relevant is that in consulting in general, what you do is you analyze the current problem, but you don't analyze what were the situations or the conditions that were going on when that problem presented itself. And sometimes the context is more relevant than the problem itself, because it can explain what happened, what was the dynamic with people, what were people feeling at that moment in time. And maybe it has to do with things that we didn't think about, even the weather. Maybe some problems with the climate, or maybe the political climate, etc., that was going on and that people didn't analyze when analyzing the problem. So alternate history provides a multi-perspective learning, which is really relevant because it creates memorable messages. Once we go through consulting using alternative history, people will never forget it because they became co-creators of the alternate futures. So this is really part of me. And in doing that, we can actually create sustainable habits that can build the organizational culture. And we start by doing a simple technique, which is called the elephant in the room. And this is a metaphor for an important or enormous topic that no one's mentioned. It's like we're all together here and there's an elephant, but nobody seems to be able to talk about that, although we all know it's there. And these are topics that people get really uncomfortable talking about. Maybe because they're personal, maybe it has to be with a mistake. And these also can be topics that can be personally, socially, or politically embarrassing, or maybe controversial or inflammatory or even dangerous. So people avoid talking about these things. And normally, these are the root causes of larger problems. So these are non-addressed issues, big problems that are minimized as if they didn't exist. No real dialogue emerges, so people don't talk about the problem, they avoid it. And when talking about the problem, they go into passive-aggressive behavior because no one wants to feel guilty or being pointed at when a problem emerged. So in addressing problems, that's the regular way of doing that. When people identify some wrongdoing, what they do immediately is find the guilty one. So they point all that fingers at somebody, and that person doesn't want to talk about the problem anymore. Instead of trying to solve it, the feeling of guilt kind of blocks out the possibility of communication. So that's where the value of alternate history enters. If you fake what happened or fake the situation or change something about what happened to analyze the problem in a different way, the guilt goes away because you were not there at that moment. So it was not you. So you focus on the problem and not on the person. And we can stimulate different actions. We can have identifying the driving factors behind the action. So what really led to that action happening? And if we do that, then we can actually model the behavior and we can promote change through that too. And there are 3 different types or issues and ways of dealing with them or not. So when we're doing consulting, there are a lot of things that are ignored. So what we need to do is tackle them head on or defer. So maybe we can say, okay, if these things, you want to ignore them permanently, we're going to forget about them. There are other problems that although people believe they're very big, these are imagined problems. So what you need to do normally is talk about them. And the more you talk about them and discuss them, they tend to disappear because you realize that this was something that just was imaginary. And others are problems that are kind of insistent, that are there, that no matter what you do, you continue to bring those problems around. And these are problems that we either need to deal with or otherwise we're going to stay stalled. And these insistent problems are the ones that are considered like the elephant in the room. Those that are there and will continue to be with us every single meeting that we have. Now, something that caught the eye from the earlier presentation was that here we named this technology, this methodology that we use, business archaeology. And that's one of the steps that we use in analyzing the problems to see what we can change. And it's interesting because people might normally don't think that you can do archaeology in a business, but through the history of a business, you can find certain artifacts or tools that were used or documents that include even financial information. There were people in different moments in time. So although it's not an object, you can look at what people were in the company at that particular moment of in time, what was the field, what did they study, what was their expertise, etc., their positions and roles. And when we dig into that past, we can analyze things that survive dramatic histories or also alternative pasts. We can analyze what went wrong and how we can forget about those problems in the past because we remedy them and bring different perspectives into the future. So when we start with the business archaeology analysis, what we do is we talk to people and tell them, okay, imagine that you were in the company maybe 20 years ago, if that's when the problem emerged, and try to identify or imagine what you think was there. So we even talk about positions and situations. We even create maps about how they thought the distribution of the organization might be, because space really creates context. So we talk about all these things and start creating this sense of what are the things that we should change. And also, we invent things that we can put in that business archaeology, in that situation, that might help solve the problem. So imagine that in that context, you could find, I don't know, maybe a pencil or a pen or something. What would you do with that in that moment that would change the current future? Then we also draw timelines about the moments in which the company had several problems, and we go as back as we can so that we analyze critical moments, especially these context features, for example, economic, political, social, and as I said, even the weather. And we have 2 different timelines. So we have the true timeline, and then we create the alternate history timeline. Because what we want to do is somehow stick to the truth and then part from there to create these alternative scenarios, basically. And in that, what we do is we collect what we call triggers. What were the things that triggered the problem? And identify them clearly in the timeline. And we can see if there are certain cycles, maybe this is a problem or a trigger that emerged in different moments, but created different results according to the moment or the context in which it happened. Then we also start substituting courses of events. We can have do-overs. So maybe you draw the first timeline and you see that you're not going anywhere, so you can do overs. And that's the good thing about alternate history. You can change it as often as you want. And we also do what's called playing with black swans. And black swans is a term coined by Nicolas Taleb. And he says that black swans are like these events that people don't think that ever happen, maybe something that happens once in a lifetime, but that in reality, they're more frequent than we might think. So we identify these critical issues and we go back and forth in time. And this way we can rethink and rebuild businesses. It's as if we go back to that archaeology and we start collecting all the pieces that we can rebuild from. And then we also use simulation games. Some of them are make-believe just like that, and others are on a computer. So that with all the information that we collect, we create these patterns in which people can still make changes and see the different results that might be when different changes were made, especially when we're talking about risk assessment, for instance. So if we change something in the past, what will the result have been, for instance, in our revenues, or in the number of people that will be currently working in the company, or in the equipment that we have bought, etc. And we have also introduced art. This is one of the latest things that we've done. 2 days ago, we have a workshop that we do remotely from Puebla for this same event. And this time we introduced a technique called soul collage. It's a methodology. And we recoined it and called it strategic collage because we're using it for strategic problem solving. And what participants do is they create a collage, and then they try to create a narrative from that collage and explain an alternative future from that. And I'm going to show you just from some of the examples that they did 2 days ago. So this is one. And very interesting things emerge because at first they just collect the pieces and present their collages. And then when they create the narrative here, they said that the company at that moment in time was like crossing through a ring of fire. And then they start explaining everything that they saw and the things that they collected, etc. So it's really interesting, the narratives that emerge from images like this. And the good thing about collage is that you don't need to have any expertise in arts. So it's like starting from a basis in which everyone has the same capabilities. All you need to do is cut and kind of figure out how you're going to piece the things together. And then from that, it's really easy to tell a story. And of course, this is an alternate story or an alternate history that you're creating about the company. So this has resulted in a very interesting session. And we have replicated that session again, but now with faculty, and 2 more workshops are coming because of all the stir that this created. So people became really interested with this kind of activity. And what's interesting too is that when you analyze also shapes and colors and position of the pieces, and you relate that to what's going on to the company, you kind of find deep meanings that you never thought would be there. And you can create all these alternative pasts and presents and future. And we also use what if questions frequently, but we also ask what else. So what we try is to elicit conversations so that we don't stop with a conversation in a moment. We continue, okay, and now with that, what else? And we have also moved from the 5 whys, which is a traditional tool used in consulting, which is a Japanese technique. And we have moved to 5 what ifs. And I don't remember exactly, but I believe in the last presentation, you also repeatedly what if again and what if again. And this is really a very powerful question because it opens numerous possibilities. And by doing this, we're learning from history at the same time, because when doing all the business archaeology and writing the original timelines, people are actually studying about the history of the business, and a lot of that information they might not have known because they were not there possibly. So we're learning from the history of the business, from different historical perspectives, but we have this possibility of the right to fail and this fantasy life in which we construct alternatives and maybe what we would like to have seen, or if we would like to have been there, what would we have done? And this is about getting back on track on how can we better businesses in the future, co-constructing and creating habits that really stick to people, and that they know that no matter what happens, you can go back to the situation and reanalyze it and rethink it, and that will help you learn how to deal with things in the future. So really that's what I had as a presentation for you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for keeping perfectly on time. So we are online. We have a chat open in YouTube. Manuel, who is assisting us, will send us some questions if there are. I had some ideas to start this conversation, but first I'll invite you, Cynthia and David, to exchange some questions if you have about each other's work.
Can I ask, when have you started using this?
I think that your works have some points in common. The what if is just the beginning. David.
Yeah, I was asking, when did you start were you the one introducing this to your company, this methodology to think of business?
Yes, it's not a company. I work at a business school, so I started as a faculty. I'm currently the dean. But yes, I really like to connect ideas from different areas and bring them into business. So that's why we started using what-if questions and introducing novel techniques to existing tools, traditional tools in consulting. And by doing this, we have expanded the possibilities. We have created repertoires of new techniques that we can develop, and with very novel results. And people really like this because they become part of the story and part of the solution of the problem.
I was also wondering, do you think people sort of manifest what they are worried about when they ask their what-if questions?
Yes, of course. And since they're kind of telling a story that's not theirs,
exactly.
They're more open to say it as it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there's no guilt. There's nothing that comes towards them. We're analyzing the problem from different perspectives, but they're really telling how they feel. So it becomes really emotional.
Yeah. So from a business perspective, how do you think this interplay between emotion and business strategy? I think it's a great way to combine them, right? Because if you're working within fiction ideas and you're just like talking about the business history, you learn from business, so you are helping people better themselves in their works. At the same time, they feel like they are expressing their emotions. So I was just wondering, do you see any any people from the university, from the school, going forward in business and applying this and telling you about it?
And in fact, some of the things that we do is our students have to go to different businesses and use the techniques there. Yeah. And it's really interesting what they found. Normally, emotions are everything because organizations, it's people, basically. We have the process, etc., but it's all about people. And people have different emotions every single day when they go to work. And these collective emotions make the organizational climate, how you feel and how you perceive certain things. Are you happy at work? Are you angry at work? Do you feel valued, etc.? And then climate connects to culture. And you need culture to create strategy. Because you cannot create strategy with a culture that's not a right fit. So basically, it all connects to emotions.
Yeah.
And I was thinking just about that when you were talking about the feel that you get when you were doing the stone prints.
Yes, yes.
That you wanted to get the feel of the people at that moment.
Exactly.
So I also had a question regarding that. When you did that, what was the feel?
So yeah, I feel like I should have delved into that a little bit. So I'm still trying to categorize it. But let's say, for example, that I'm just doing a small portion of the map while these people are doing like huge and really big maps for a very long time. For a lot of months, they were just doing, imagine just like a 15 meters square or 15 centimeters square part of the map. What I've tried to analyze, for example, is how I sort of recorded my body postures and tried to see different levels of the table, so of the tables they could have worked on. I haven't really categorized that, but I'm really interested in seeing like what would be their best conditions, what would they try to get from the superiors, like we need this material to be more comfortable, we need to start working earlier and finish also earlier because the lights conditions are not the best at let's say at 6 o'clock. But I'm still trying to capture all of this little information. I need to find out where there are the schedules from the 19th century workers, which are difficult things to find. But one of the things that I felt doing these maps is the really so what we have here is that people that are clearly devoted to what they're doing, like detailed wise. They are really passionate about this very small information. It's very delicate. It's also very precise. So it's delicate, it's precise, it's probably is made in a manner that is very rigorous for them. And they clearly cared about those things because they were seeing that all the time. But body-wise, I would say these people would have really bad lives in general because they would go into forward in time with a lot of back pain for sure. And I've talked to a lot of to current printmakers that are older and they have printed from stone lithography, and most of them have a lot of health complications because when you were printing with these materials back in the 19th century, you weren't aware, as we are now, of the toxicity of these materials. So, like for example, say they were using nitric acid to etch the stone, and this is what they were using, and they were using no masks. They were constantly around turpentine and all of these materials that we know now that are very toxic, and we have a lot of rules to use them. So these people probably, I'm still trying to match how late they died and try to see with other professions if they die early and if there's a pattern here that I can sort of use as an argument to see how printmakers' lives were shortened because of their profession. But before I make that kind of assertion, I need to be more academic first. But those are the things that I'm worried about, I would say. Thank you for your question.
Because in the end, as you see, everything has to do with how people connect, the emotions they feel, the way of life, the problems they had. So basically, it's the same. And what's interesting about you presenting maps is we have also used maps as part of our what if techniques. So what we do is there's a project that's called Animals on the Underground, which was made for the London Underground. And let me see if I have an image here. Just let me show it to you. This is just from the internet. This is not what we use, but just for you to give you an idea. What this project does is that they take maps and they try to draw animals based on the lines actually on the map. So they're adding information. All they're doing is retracing some things that are already there. So what we do is we give people a map. Of course, what we try to do is give people maps that maybe they don't know. Because if you give them the map of the city of Puebla, they will immediately imagine certain things and they will block. But what we do is we give them maps and we say, we present some things like this so that they get an idea of what they should be doing. And then we give them a clear map and transparent piece of paper that they put over the map, and then they will start tracing. And we say, find everything that you can think of. So they start looking at the information and try to find different things. And what's interesting is that you can identify people who can work together because they kind of see more or less the same things, or they focus on specific things. So you look at different mindsets. And that's really interesting. So maps have so much value because of all the things that you can do with the information in maps.
Interesting. So the argument here would be if they think similarly, they can work together. That makes sense. Like
not just that they can work together, but they can do certain things together. But also you can identify, for instance, we see someone that identifies very small things. So that person goes to details. So when you need to do a project, that person, we will put them in a position in which they will do things related to details. Maybe others find numbers, so they have a numeric mind. So when you think about costs and other things, those are the people that you put them in that positions, because those are you can understand how their mind operates based on what they do with the information you give them, because you're giving them all the same information, but nothing has to do with the work they do. It's just about how their mind operates with unknown information. And some people will classify the information. Some people will make single drawings. Others will connect different drawings together. Or some will make a full story. So it's different minds operating. Do you see the full picture? Do you look at specific things? Even the position of the objects that they find on top, on the middle, or on the bottom of the image. Do they concentrate on certain type of things? Maybe do they find animated things or just geometrical figures? So that's kind of a different ways in which different minds process information, because maybe of the schooling that you had, the previous information that you have, and that's how your mind operates mainly. And what's interesting is that find these different styles and combine them in a way in which they can produce better results.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I teach drawing at the university, and this is in what you're saying is just like it makes total sense in a way that you can totally see people's inclination towards different graphical aspects. The way they're going after different things is because they are more comfortable with that, and thinking of that like in a way that could translate to other things in which they would be better as a task within that profession, and focus on that in a way that would sort of echo their personality and make them feel comfortable or within their workspace, because there is a way to understand them and they understand themselves now better. That's my question, I would say. Do you communicate these results to people, like, because you're talking to adults? Do you tell them, look, you are alike, or no?
What we normally do at the end of the sessions is that they work on a transparent piece of paper over the things, and then we project them. And when we see minds that think alike, what we start doing is project them overlapped. And then you will see immediately that, oh, he thought exactly of the same thing, or he saw exactly the same thing, or this is complementary, or wow, he saw things I never saw. So you start comparing these things, and people might say, oh, I need that person in my team because he has a mind that's sharp for certain things. And it's about kind of self-discovery. And also we talk about the psychology of color and the psychology of shapes when you're more inclined to certain shapes and things like that. And it really connects people.
It's a great idea. Thank you for sharing with us. I really like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the part with maps, people adore it because it's like trying to find, let's see, the invisible stories behind them that are not there, but that they create.
That I would like to say something that maybe it's interesting. So historical wise, maps are connected to people that have money to pay them, so they're connected to power. But it is interesting because from the 20th centuries on, there was this thing called psychogeography, which is when you pick up a map of your city and maybe this is something interesting to introduce somehow or change it for a business perspective. But imagine like a map of the company, and people they make the exercise to select the places where they've been happy. For example, there are these emotional maps of like tell us where you give your first kiss, and then they make a map where everyone gave their first kiss within their city, and tell us where you've been the most happy during your childhood, for example. And this sort of like makes the city more warm in a way. It makes space, the way you were saying. I really like what you said before, space is about contest or something something that was related to the way we see space is important. What space reflects how we are, and that's why our homes
How
have
we feel.
exactly.
There's a feel to spaces.
Exactly. And maybe this is something interesting. It was introduced in France. It was called cycle.
Happy map. Yeah.
And maybe just a way to make, for example, use the company map to make them a place where you've been the most productive, place where you've been the most.
I think happy because what we want is happy people. So
yeah, of course. Yeah,
the places where you have been the happiest.
Yeah. So I haven't introduced this in the fine art concepts, but artists use this all the time because they are really interested in using things that are general and for example, if they're connected to power and make it more personable. That's what artists do most of the times. They try to use their own story or to project other stories into things that people haven't seen, so people can do the same as well. And sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not, but artists try to do that all the time. And it's really interesting for me to think of a business perspective within these ideas because I've never thought about that.
We also use it, for instance, to create mission and vision statements. We use collage or paint, whatever, and we ask each person to draw something or to paint something that relates to how they feel with regards to the company. And then what we do is we take the piece of paper or the piece that they did, and we analyze based on 4 quadrants. And 4 quadrants has to do with the past, then it has to do with the future, and also it has to do with the basis over which you construct. And that's normally that's a type of analysis that we do when you relate psychology to these techniques. And after everybody expresses and explains their piece, etc., what we do is we cut the pieces into 4 squares, and then we create a collage from the pieces of everyone. And once the piece is complete, then we retell the story, trying to say what do we want to say based on the ideas of everyone and the parts and the sections of what everybody thought of their feelings towards the company. So we write the new company story, their mission statement, and their vision statement based on art.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
We don't start with words, we start with image.
Wow, that's really cool. And the pictures that you've shown us, they are really interesting. They're
and these are the ones that I selected, but there were more. But I believe that they have a lot of power in them.
Yes.
And it's just cut out pieces of magazines. So,
like the ring fire metaphor was really interesting.
Yeah. Yes, and they also put like the clocks, and it was they also said it was like feeling that we were in the dark, like at night, that we didn't have things to do, but still we were going through rings of fire. So I thought the metaphor was really powerful.
Yeah, I really like it. It was really nice to see.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt your talk.
I think we're over the time, right?
The idea of the mission and the vision, I was thinking about this before the presentations, because in my mind you were working with maybe the managers or the low rank workers, but I thought that this technique can also be applied to the CEO, to the C-level persons in the company, exactly to define what should be the mission and the vision of the company, what should be the priorities to get to the markets.
What we do normally is we create groups in which we integrate people from all levels. And if possible, if the company is not that large, we integrate everyone and then we separate them into different groups. And then we still collect all the images from everyone and create this big masterpiece. And then when they have the mission statement, what we bring is all this art framed so that they can put them like in a space that is visible for everyone, so that they can connect to the mission and vision statement, not just through the words that ended up being written, but also through this image to which they collaborated.
That's great, because I would assume that sometimes low-ranking workers have difficulty talking about the elephant in the room in front of C-level persons in the companies, and I think that the technique can be very powerful to put people talking about people behave differently. That's
Yes.
I think it's powerful. Yeah.
Yes, it's very powerful.
And to David, I also had a what if challenge for you, because you said maybe that the printmakers were trying to hide or could hide some messages in their very detailed maps. And I wondered, the map that I knew the best from the 19th century was the rose-colored map. For Cynthia, it was the map where Portugal tried to claim
Africa.
And that failure led to, or it was caused by a British ultimatum.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it led to the fall of the monarchy, of the Portuguese monarchy. And I was thinking, David, do you think that maybe the color and maybe the shape and maybe the limits of the map were kind of a subliminary Republican message to overthrow monarchy?
I would have to think, but you were asking if the shape of the rose color map was a way to send the message to the monarchy. Well, I would say that maps from the state were highly scrutinized, so probably any hints on any kind of rebellious way to think was probably overthrown. But let's imagine that there are the maps are really detailed. I for example, what I'm doing at university is that I'm reproducing some of the maps, I'm also allowing myself to let those messages stay in the map, because I don't think people will have time. The way we look at pictures is really fast. We especially today, we look at pictures like bullets. They just pass through us. So I do like the idea that pictures conceal things, and right now we are also aware of how information is concealed from us. So I do like to play with that. But I do like your suggestion. Maybe I'll do something about it, and I'll thank you later and put it on the acknowledgements.
And please consider that still the representation of maps nowadays is still bound to power, because now we all rely on maps made by Americans on Google Maps or other sources, and they can conceal also information, and countries also conceal some information, because they, for instance, they disguise the military bases.
Yeah.
Some countries don't allow street view, so there is still a lot of power relations in now in modern maps in digital times. So maybe in some years the archaeology of 21st century maps will find something interesting too.
For sure. I would say that even now today, it's more powerful than ever, because if you think about Google Maps, I've read I read a text that I have it here in this book. It's in Portuguese, and for our Portuguese audience, I mean, there is a translation, and this is a British writer, and there is a text here about Google Earth. Before Google Maps, we all know there was Google Earth. Google spent a lot of money making that platform even available, and for a lot of years there was this discussion around why was Google spending so much money on it, because it was really losing a lot of money, and we know how Americans don't like to lose money. So the thing is that nowadays they dominate they have every picture. They have mostly. So the idea of concealing, it's true, it's power concealing, but the fact that we don't have also privacy is also a way to play on power, right? Because nowadays we have all of the globe sort of mapped in a way the discussion about privacy is also privacy, transparency is also a way to control. In a philosophical discussion, maps are these things that they appear as neutral, as a way to just to explain how the territory is. They can be emotional maps, they can help us navigate the world, but in general, their history is really connected to how much you know about the territory, and because you know the territory, you sort of own the territory. That's how countries worked before, because they had the map of the territory, they own the territory. And this is before our ages to come. And maps were propagandists. Maps also lied. Maps lied all the time. There were maps from battles made. This is an interesting area for me because I don't know a lot of that. But maps of war have been drawn and printed to sort of make what we call now fake news. So in Portugal, there was a map that talked about the battle we had with Spain, that we called ourselves the victories and we won the territory. And in Spain, they were also doing a map on how they conquered Portugal. So the perception of how things are based on images has always been this. We are just more aware of it right now, but we're also in it, right? So we don't know. In the past years, we had a discussion about fake news a lot because of American elections, and I would say it's a never-ending story. I think maps are really powerful tools, but we have to be critical about them for sure. I'm sorry that I took so long to talk.
Oh, it's perfect. We still have a couple of minutes if you want to exchange some more ideas.
Yes, when you were talking about emotional maps, and I look at the images that you presented, I believe from a gallery in which words started to appear instead of the lines of the map. Exactly. It would be really interesting to see, for instance, a map of a place of war and the different emotions that the people felt at that moment, and all the death and the grief with those words instead of lines.
That's exactly.
That's exactly what you did.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I mean,
wow.
I didn't have the time to. I didn't have the time because I'm probably not good at organizing information. But the projects that I'm developing are about that. Are about using the maps of war and sort of place a fictional voice on top of them and explain exactly those ideas. But it's interesting that you think about that as well. It's really interesting.
I imagine right now, for instance, with a conflict with Gaza and Israel, I imagine that map with such powerful words about how people on both sides were feeling.
Yeah,
that really creates a completely different context when we talk about just emotions and not just territory.
Exactly, and the idea even of territory, it's we define territory based on what, right? It's just a drawing, but it should be about people. Like businesses should be about people. Everything should be about people. I think we seem to forget that. Humans' life are really important to and very vulnerable to these things. The Gaza and like the Israel and Palestine conflict has been over for how long? For us, 60 years. I don't know.
80 years.
Yeah, I've seen maps about it, and I've seen maps where you can see the territory of Palestine shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and it's an apartheid on it's a what they call an open air prison, something like that, right? Maps are this
really powerful.
Yeah, they seem very neutral, very quiet. They are not so silent.
Not at all.
But they can be repurposed, right? And that's what I think.
Yes.
That's what I think it's important to remember, that things are. A lot of technologies were developed for war. I think maybe we should mention that. For example, I research about the telescope, and the telescope, it's something that we use for astronomy today and something that we use for entertainment. But the telescope was invented for military purposes. It was a way to spot on enemies on a very far away overseas. The internet was developed in war. The computer was developed on war. The radar was developed on war. Cartography and printmaking apparently developed in war. In war times, war seems to push technology forward, which is something really crazy to think about. because we depend on technological development to have better lives, apparently, but we seem to forget how they are connected to this historical progression. And when I talked about Walter Benjamin, he was a person that was really worried about that idea of just like blindly progress. Let's focus on the people. Let's focus on their lives. Let's not forget that AI is also taking over jobs, and is probably going to take over jobs eventually. And that's interesting for a business perspective, because businesses should be ethical, right? They should embrace new technology, but remember that businesses are for people, right?
Yes.
I think we all agree on that, and our time is running out.
Okay, sorry.
Because I think that it's the perfect cherry on our cake for this session.
It was really interesting.
Yeah, I
It's
think
really
that we can keep our emails and maybe exchange some messages in the future.
Sure, I would love to keep in touch.
I will meet you, Cynthia. Thank you very much. And I actually
Yeah,
would like to see pictures, more pictures of those collages.
we have to say goodbye to our audience and close this session. I invite you to then exchange the messages that you want, and perhaps helping me organize the ideas to create a summary of this session. Thank you again for being here, David and Cynthia.
Thank you.
I hope you have a good day. It's still early in the morning in Mexico, I think.
It's already 11.
Okay,
So...
it's okay. Okay, thank you a lot. Thank you to the audience, and see you next time.
Next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.